o'clock now, so I'll make a start. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the first meeting of the Forensic Services Committee of the Scottish Police Authority for 2025. I'm Paul Leedy, I'm the chair of the committee. If I should drop off the call for any reason, Caroline Stewart, would you take over the chairing of the meeting until I'm reconnected? Caroline, this is Caroline's last meeting as a member of the Forensic Services Committee because she's retiring from the board before our next meeting. And I'd like to thank you, Caroline, for your contribution over your membership of Forensic Services. You've always contributed very energetically and with very wise counsel, and we're really grateful for the input that you've had over the years, and wish you all the very best going forward. But thanks for everything you've done for us. We're also joined from the Crown Office by Ruth McQuaid, and from Police Scotland by Chief Superintendent Conrad Trickett, who will be joining us for item 6, which is digital forensics. We've got Chief Superintendent Gordon McCready and Chief Superintendent Hilary Sloan. There may be others that join us, but they're the principal representatives from Police Scotland this morning. So welcome to all of them. We're also going to be joined by Raymond Brown from PERC, who I see has just joined us. From HMICS, we have apologies from Brian Johnson, but we do have Craig Naylor with us, and I see Craig on the call just now, so welcome, Craig. We have no apologies from members. Do we have any declarations of interest from anyone? Connections?
No.
No, super. You can note that, collect. That then takes us on to any other business. Is there any other business that anyone wants to raise for discussion later on? Not seeing that? No, super. Okay, then we move on to 1.5, which is decision to take business in private, which is items 9 to 12. And this is in accordance with section 20 of the SPA standing orders. Can I ask members if they agree to take agenda items 9 and 12 in private? Not hearing any dissent there, so I'll take that as tacit assent. Super. That moves us then on to item 2, which is a minute in the actions from the previous meeting. Circulated is the minute of the Forensics Committee held on the 28th of October, and that's there for approval. Are there any matters of accuracy that members or others want to raise on this? Not seeing anything there. So can we then agree the minute of the Forensic Services Committee on the 28th of October 2024? We've got item 2.2 is next. Bear with me, which is the actions from various committee meetings. All 3 actions are posed as ongoing. Just bear with me, I'm just going to get them up. So the first is verbal discussion in the February committee of the final report and actions for that's output of Your Voice Matters, online reporting and benchmarking details, and strategic workforce plan we want to cite before March. And there's explanations for why these are all ongoing. Any questions on this from members? If we just note them as ongoing, then that moves us on to decisions since the last meeting, of which there are none. And then 3.1, which is a Forensic Service Director's report. And welcome to Fiona Douglas, who's going to introduce this and speak to the report. So Fiona, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. I will take my report as read and highlight a number of areas within it. It has been a busy period since the last Forensic Services Committee back in October of last year. And my report summarises some key activity during this period that will be discussed in more detail as the committee meeting progresses today. I wanted to start with really my concerns regarding the increasing demand for drug driving toxicology analysis, which has developed into a more significant concern over the full period of Q3, with an increase in demand of around about 20% over that period. This has been the subject of much discussion with Police Scotland colleagues through the Operation Hitch working group and the Forensic Performance and Improvement Group. However, at present, it's not possible to determine if this level of demand is expected to increase, stay the same, or reduce to the levels agreed in the Memorandum of Understanding for drug driving toxicology provision. As per section 10.4 of that MOU, it is currently anticipated to be a short-term increase in demand, and as such, it's being managed through additional outsourcing. As this level of demand was not budgeted for in this financial year, this is forming an additional pressure on the Forensic Services revenue budget of around about £40,000 this financial year. Should this continue into next year, the pressure on Forensic Services in relation to unplanned and unfunded outsourcing is likely to be between £200,000 and £1 million, dependent on whether demand plateaus at Q3 levels or continues to increase at the same rate. Using outsourcing minimises the risk of cases being unable to proceed to prosecution due to laboratory delays. It does, however, rely on there being sufficient capacity in the UK forensic science marketplace to outsource to. At the current time, there is no increased risk of cases being unable to proceed to prosecution. However, if demand were continue to increase at the same rate seen in Q3, it is anticipated that there would not be sufficient capacity in the United Kingdom to support the analysis of these samples. In December, Forensic Services presented the business case for the long-term sustainable model for criminal toxicology provision that sets out the demand to allow laboratory capacity to grow to meet the long-term anticipated demand. This was presented to Resources Committee in December. This long-term sustainable model would allow and enable Police Scotland to roll out roadside testing for drugs to all local policing officers, supporting a zero-tolerance approach to drug driving on the roads of Scotland. Learning is also being taken from a pilot of this approach in Shetland, where local policing officers have been trained to undertake the roadside testing. On the 5th of December, I visited Shetland with Hilary Sloan, Head of Roads Policing, to launch the pilot, which will run for 6 months. The learning from this will be really important and support the development of the full business case for the long-term sustainable model. Moving on from drug driving, on Wednesday, the 20th of November, the Forensic Services senior management team, Scottish Police Authority board members and colleagues took part in a parliamentary reception at the Scottish Parliament in Holyrood. This was an excellent opportunity to showcase some of the work that Forensic Services undertakes to MSPs and colleagues, and to hear reflections on how we structure and deliver forensic science in Scotland from Audrey Nicholl, the chair of the Scottish Parliament Criminal Justice Committee. In regards to quality, the annual accreditation activity for Forensic Services was concluded at the end of the calendar year, which was the culmination of more than 75 days of assessment time over Q3. The visits were very positive, and a recommendation was received from UCAS to maintain our accreditation status, subject to the closeout of the recommendations made during the visit. During that visit, Forensic Services agreed an approach with UCAS to comply with the Gen 6 requirements, which we've discussed at previous committees, which are now in the progress of being implemented after discussions with the Crown Office. In January, the colleagues from the Westminster Commission on Forensic Science visited the Scottish Crime Campus as part of their review, which is due to publish in the spring of this year. They had wide-ranging discussions with myself and members of the senior management team on how forensic science has developed in Scotland and the different challenges between how it is delivered here in comparison with England and Wales. It was a really valuable conversation, and I look forward to considering the outcome of their review later in the year. I just wanted to finish my comments in relation to the Director's report with a thank you for Caroline, given that this is your last Forensic Services Committee meeting, Caroline. And I just wanted to say thank you very much for the huge support that you have made to the development of Forensic Services. I think I think you would reflect, I hope you would reflect that it's night and day compared to the interactions that we had when you first started on the Forensic Services Committee. And you've been a huge part, I think, in our journey to where we are today. And a personal note, I want to thank you for your wise counsel, and I know I would extend that to other members of my senior management team, and really to thank you very much for your enthusiastic support and also the challenge that you've made to us. So thank you very much, and I wish you all the best for the future. I'm happy to take any questions, Chair.
Great, thank you very much, Fiona. Now, we have got drug driving on the agenda as a substantive issue, as a substantive item rather. Lots of issues. I'll just maybe say at this stage that I hear what you're saying about the MOU and the outstripping of the demand, potentially outstripping supply going forward. And I think that's something that I think reinforces the need for a long-term sustainable model for forensic services and getting that business case completed and into government. How long do you reckon that would take to ramp up to meet projected demand? Is that going to be a year, 2 years, or is it how long is a piece of string?
The next stage is to move from the initial business case to the full business case. And there's a lot of work that would be involved in terms of the procurement activity, the estates activity, and the digital division activity in order to move from initial business case to full business case. So we would anticipate that there's at least 12 months worth of activity to progress to full business case. Beyond that, and gaining agreement on the investment that's required, there is still at least a 2-year implementation period. So in total, it's at least 3 years if we were to get a decision to progress today before we would see the introduction and the full implementation of a long-term sustainable model.
Okay, and because I mean, we'll probably discuss this in more depth a little later on. I think that's probably sensible, but it's a very finding between a rock and a hard place here, because I want people that are taking drugs and driving off the roads. I want them to be found caught and have their licenses removed. But it does present, and Police Scotland are doing a great job in ramping up this, but it does present a headache and we're not going to get them off the roads if there isn't the capacity there to test them and make sure that they are doing what the testing kits at the side of the road are doing. So anyway, can I suggest maybe we discuss this in more depth when we get to the substantive item, unless any other board member wants to pitch in at this point? No? Okay. Can I also just say how delighted I was with the parliamentary event that we had, and it was an excellent opportunity to showcase the work of forensic services to some very key decision makers there. And I went away from that with having heard a lot of very positive things said by particularly the members of the Justice Committee. I also learned a fair bit about some of the things that our officers are doing. I've been around the block long enough to know that I don't know it all. So it was a terrific education. So well done to everybody that was involved in that. Can I also say that I'm noting the aspect in your report about UCAS accreditation for the 26th year. And can I just say that's, again, quite remarkable. And again, congratulations to Forensics for what you've done. Can you maybe also tell us, I'm looking at the Westminster Forensic Commission team's visit to Gartcosh. Can you maybe expand on that a little bit? And, if there was any concerns raised, is there impact? I'm looking at my notes here. Sorry. Yeah. Anyway, if you can, maybe expand on that a wee bit.
Certainly, Chair. So the all-party parliamentary group from Westminster have been in discussions with forensic services from time to time as they've been undertaking their review of forensic science with a particular view of how some of the risks in terms of how forensic science is delivered in England and Wales could play into miscarriages of justice, and that's the focus of the all-party parliamentary group, and they've been looking at that for some time, and are due to report in the spring of this year. They were particularly keen to discuss with us how forensic science has developed in Scotland, particularly over a large period where we've looked at fingerprints becoming part of forensic services scenes of crime. So our scene examiners moving into forensic services as was then. And really how we moved from geographical delivery to national delivery. So really the whole journey that forensic science in Scotland has been on over a long period. So they were very interested in that and some of the challenges which we had faced, and reflecting that then into how forensic science is structured and delivered in England and Wales. So they're looking very much at making recommendations on how forensic science could be better delivered in England and Wales. And we're keen to look across different jurisdictions, both within the United Kingdom and across in Europe, to support the delivery of that work. So really using Scotland as somewhat of a comparator in terms of what we've done, what works, what our challenges are. And we know that the model that we have in Scotland, I think, is excellent, and that's certainly borne out through comments that we have from other partners and stakeholders. However, it does have its challenges, and demand management is certainly one of those, and I've touched on that in my report already. And it was good to talk through some of that so that they can take the learning from Scotland and feed that then into recommendations that they will make around the broader review that they've done across the whole of England and Wales.
Great, thanks for that. Any comments or questions from other members? Angela.
Thanks, Chair. Just one other point I wanted to say well done to the team on was the Brian Plasto's report, the Commissioner's report on biometrics. I think that's worthy of comment here. So well done, Fiona, and the rest of the team for that. And sorry, Chair, you may want to delay this until the drugs paper, but I was interested in the Shetland pilot and whether or not there was anything that Fiona or colleagues from Police Scotland wanted to say about how that was going at this point in time. But happy to wait for the later report.
Deal with it now if you like, Fiona.
I think probably before I weigh in, Hilary, would you like to comment
Yes,
from a Police Scotland perspective?
Yes, thank you, Fiona. Good morning, Chair, colleagues. So probably just an update in relation to the Shetland pilot. It's been running since the start of the festive Drink, Drug, Drive campaign, which was launched on the 2nd of December. So since then, we have had 12 instances where drug wipes have been used, 5 where there has been a positive, 1 where it's been refused, and 6 where it's been negative. The feedback just now from officers is really encouraging, and also from the local community in relation to the actual pilot in the first instance and what has been achieved to date with regards to that. And obviously the pilot will continue until June this year, and then we will undertake an evaluation as to how it went and then make decisions going forward as to what we do on the back of that evaluation.
Great, thanks for that. Fiona.
Yeah, I myself and Hilary attended Shetland and to launch the pilot, and it was a hugely valuable visit from, I think, both of our perspectives, and it was really good, particularly to link in with local councillors to understand the impact that the ability of local policing officers to be able to have the roadside testing capability would have in terms of communities feeling safer around the roads in Shetland. So I think it's a really important part of the benefits that we would want to understand for the long-term sustainable model, because that impact around community safety and the ability of local policing officers to have the the roadside testing capability. I think it's really important that we can feed that into the full business case, because it's a difficult part to measure. And I think we can get some really strong feedback and some really valuable feedback from colleagues in Shetland, and also from the local community about the impact that this is having.
Great. Any other questions or comments? No, I'm going to move the business on then. Excuse me. The next item we've got then is item 3.2, the Forensic Service Performance Report. And welcome back, Vicky. It's good to see you back with us.
Thank you, Chair, and morning, everyone. So I'm going to put over the Forensic Services Performance Report for Q3. So that's obviously October to December 2024. So if we can just first of all look at the executive summary, and there's a couple of things on slide 3 I'd like to point out. Firstly, it's been another period of strong performance, particularly around those urgent scene attendances and urgent casework demands from Police Scotland and COPFS. And also during this period and longer, actually over the last 12 months, there has been that continued steady fall in our caseload, or the work in progress that's ongoing within the laboratory areas. I'd like to just pause there and thank all our people across forensic services for delivering this positive improvement, particularly if you think back all the time it's been of continuous change, etc., and also the UCAS assessment visits that we've already spoken about today. In terms of overall demand, that has reduced, and it has been possible during this time to focus on improving the timeliness and those longer casework target dates, priority 3, and also a focus on priority 2, although that hasn't been as marked an improvement, which we'll possibly come on to later. In terms of staff absence rates, there has been an increase. But again, it's seen that seasonal variation, which we would expect, and we have seen in previous years across the organisation. But just to note that it's still lower than we are seeing across Police Scotland. In terms of, again, I would like to point out the work around the Scottish Biometrics Commissioner's Code of Practice and the self-assessments. This is our second self-assessment we've done. And again, it's really pleasing to see, as Angela's already mentioned, that the Scottish Biometric Commission has confirmed that they're satisfied that forensic services are using biometric data in a lawful, effective and ethical manner. Moving on then to a bit more detail around our performance. Slide 4 covers our balanced scorecard. So again, this provides a summary across the balanced scorecard, looking at people, partners, processes and our resources. So again, a positive picture here, with the focus remaining on the 5-year demand forecasting work under our with our partners, and also the delivery of the quality improvement plan. Slide 5 looks at the business plan compliance, and again, a positive picture here, where the majority of work has either started and is on track, or it's been monitored closely. So again, a positive improvement there, progress there. If we then look at slides 6 and 7, these slides show the status of our performance framework. So I have another paper next on the agenda, which is looking at the revised performance framework. But if we look at this one, it will change in the future going forward. But in terms of this quarter's report, we can see a positive on slide 6, where we've moved from amber to green in terms of RIDORs. So that's the reporting of injuries, diseases and dangerous occurrences to the HSE. They've always remained very, very low indeed, but we did have one in Q2, but none in Q3, which is a positive there. Looking at slide 7, just to call it again, the 2 amber points where we're managing them and monitoring them closely is around our overall performance. But as I said, it's overall good. However, there are obviously areas for improvement, and we'll cover that later in the slide deck. And as for Q2, the partnership working has remained amber for this quarter reporting period. Again, that's centred on the biometrics joint strategy and the work to take that forward. Moving on to slide 8, which looks at health and safety. This quarter, forensic services have been reviewing again how we manage health and safety across the organisation, really delving more into that whole cultural aspect, looking at ownership of actions, etc. And it's pleasing to see that we have set up health and safety champions and a working group really to focus on this area. The graph in the middle of the slide does show that there has been an increase in accidents and near misses in Q2 and Q3. And again, this is focused previously, as we've mentioned, I'm sure in the last report, around the local exhaust ventilation system in the Scottish Crime Campus. So work is ongoing in relation to that. We're working very closely with Police Scotland Estates and suppliers to rebalance the airflow in SEC. Give you some assurance though that local measures have already been put in place for a long time actually to support the staff and make sure it's a safe working environment. Moving on then to slide 9 and 10 actually, which looks at working days lost and short and long term absence. As I've already mentioned, there has been that increase in absence. However, we're not worried about that because there's no significant trends there. It's usual seasonal illnesses there. Then moving on to quality compliance, key points here on slide 11. Yes, as I've already mentioned, a very positive assessment visit by UCAS, United Kingdom Accreditation Service. And again, really positive feedback from UCAS on our staff's engagement throughout that lengthy process has already been mentioned. So that's very positive indeed. There also, as you can see in the graph on this slide, again, Q2 and Q3, sorry, have seen that significant positive feedback and increase in those being reported to us by Police Scotland and COPFS. Which is really good to see. The number of complaints and instances of negative feedback remain low and can license with the amount of activity that goes on within forensic services. Obviously, each of these are taken on board in their own merit and looked at through our quality management system. And again, just to point out that UCAS assessment for 26 years of accreditation across the organisation is really something to celebrate. Moving on to slide 12, this provides an overview of search and recovery scenes. Key things here where there was a slight increase in scenes requested by Police Scotland for us to attend during this last quarter. And in spite of challenges from the absences that I've spoken about, we've managed to service all those requests. The timeliness of scene attendance remains quite strong, particularly obviously in relation to those more urgent scene request attendances, which are aligned to Group 1, Group 2 and Group 8. We're sitting at 96% of those attended within 24 hours. And with other types of scene requests, we're at 88% compliance in terms of that target. So again, over the years that I have been involved in search and recovery scenes, that's a really good position to be in. But we also want to ensure that continues to improve. Looking at the laboratory delivery on slide 13, just to highlight that demands did reduce in Q3 and an overall caseload, the work in progress, what we have in our to-do list, if you like, continues to reduce, which is a really positive, as I've already mentioned, positive picture there. I'd also want to highlight here on the right-hand side, the little pie charts show the internal targets being met and the percentage of those. So we've got 81% for this Q3, which is in line with the previous quarter and has obviously been an improvement since quarters previously. But there does need to be remain a focus on that activity. Slide 14 looks at delivery against our MOU, which is in place with our partners. And again, as seen here on the first 4 rows, you can see that urgent and priority demands are being met and they remain as green. With the priority 2 delivery remaining as red and the priority 3, we've seen an improvement there at the bottom row of that table there. Just to point out, it is actually easier easier to meet the P3 targets because they're a lengthy period of time, between 60 and 150 days, whereas our priority 2 targets have got much shorter time requirements here, from 8 days to 60 days, and a large chunk of those are actually only 21 days. But there is a lot of activity going on in this area, which, if there's further questions on that, I can bring other areas in the team to give you further information. And finally, slide 15 shows our internal performance status across our scientific disciplines. We are going to be moving in the future to look at it from our new structure and our capabilities, but at the moment we're still looking at the scientific disciplines. And you can see here lots of green in terms of positive performance in biology, fingerprints, chemistry and documents, and post-mortem toxicology. And improvements also been seen in search and recovery scenes and the volume crime DNA unit. So that's where we've moved them from a kind of slash amber green and the key there. Management are closely monitoring the amber areas, which are drugs and drugs driving, which again, you know, we've got separate papers on that activity, and criminal talks. And lastly, just acknowledge that firearms do remain red at this time, but I do want to highlight that there have been positive improvements seen this quarter, but we are remaining cautious at this point in time in terms of changing the status from red to amber. I'm happy to take any questions, and if there's more detailed questions, I'll bring in members of the team. Thank you.
Right. Thanks very much, excuse me, Vicky, for that. I'm going to kick off with one question and then I'll bring in other members. I'm just looking at the page 13 and the number of cases that are open cases that are overdue, and it's gone up slightly from 18% to 19% over the last quarter. Can I ask, is there any risk of time barring with any of those?
No, good question, Paul, and apologies for not being clear on that, but yeah, there's no issues around potential time bar of cases. This is something we look at regularly through our internal performance management, so no risk there.
Okay, I'm going to throw open to members. Does any other member want to come in at this point? Any questions? Angela.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks, Vicky. I found it a really clear report, so thank you for that. It was what sits behind it that I was interested in. Obviously, all these statistics are built up from the various teams that you've got working across the service areas. So can you just maybe, for my benefit, as a relatively new member, explain the performance management framework that allows you to gather this data to report then to the committee?
Yeah, so that is actually an agenda item that we have coming up next, I think, in terms of the refresh of the performance framework. So don't know, Chair, if you want me to answer that just now or leave that to the next agenda item.
Just answer it just now if you can.
Yeah, yeah, of course. So the performance framework really looks at our strategy and strategies across our partners, and looks at where are the areas that we need to focus on. So that centres around our people. Are we sustainable, adaptable, prepared for the future? Do we deliver high quality ethical services, and do we work collaboratively with our partners? So essentially, from those strategic outcomes and associated objectives, we have then developed ways of assessment, looking at our performance and how are we doing in those respects. So the next agenda item, the performance framework itself, looks at that in detail. So our managers across all of forensic services have objectives, are clear on the performance framework and what they need to deliver to take that up a level to this type of report, which is very much a high level summary.
Are you happy with that, Angela?
Thanks, Paul. Yeah, I'll maybe have a few more at the next one, Vicky. Thank you.
Thanks.
Great, thanks for that, Angela. Chris. Good morning, Chris.
Morning, Chair. Morning, Vicky. Thank you for the report. I'm just looking at slide 7, and in particular Amber on partnership working there, and I wonder if you could say a little more about that, please.
Yes, I can give a high-level overview of where I was aware prior to the last few months, and then I'll bring in anyone else who want to update previously. There was obviously the biometrics joint strategy was one of the key actions from the Scottish Biometrics Commissioner review of policing, and which obviously included Forensic Services and Police Scotland. And it was key that there was a gap in terms of a joint strategy, so we all knew what we were aiming to deliver. The initial deadline for that was some months ago, but however, because of resources, it was agreed with the Scottish Biometrics Commissioner that we had to delay until this summer. So that's why it's still as amber in this report. But I don't know if Fiona or any of my colleagues who have been more involved in this wish to add some more.
Fiona.
Thank you, Vicky. I think you summed it up pretty well there. I think we've got a really strong collaborative approach with Police Scotland, and I see Gordon on the call here with regards to the development of a joint biometric strategy. I think it's particularly important in terms of public confidence in the use of biometrics, that they can see how the two organisations work together to that aim. And I think the joint biometrics strategy will be a really important document. So we've a strong agreement between Forensic Services and Police Scotland to progress in that vein. Given the new operating model for Police Scotland, I think there was a good discussion around the need to make sure the timing of that joint biometric strategy fit at the right point within the development of the operating model for Police Scotland. And as such, there was some delay in that. But I'll perhaps bring Gordon in to see if he wants to comment any further on that.
No, I think you've covered it fairly accurately. We do have quite a firm timeline now, which has been shared across Forensic Services and Police Scotland. So I think we've got a clear direction of travel, but I'm certainly happy to pick it up afterwards if there's any broader concerns.
Thanks, Gordon. Any other questions or comments from members at this stage? No? I've got maybe one or two quick questions. The first of is, which is, I'm looking at the balance scorecards on page 4 and 5, and it's just the observation that there's a number of ambers, but there's not an awful lot of explanation or narrative surrounding the reason for them being amber and what remedial actions and revised timescales are. So perhaps would it be possible to get that the next time we have the report up?
Yes, of course. Or we can add a little more context in there. And again, slide 4, just to be clear, is around the 24-25 balance scorecard around, so it's still quarter 3. What we're looking at going forward is our business plan over 2024 to 2026. So we're covering 2 different business plans at this point, but yes, more than happy to put more narrative in there.
And just to say also generically, I think it looks like a pretty strong performance as well. And it's always nice to see something going from amber to green. So well done to everybody for the delivery they've done over quarter 3. Looking forward to seeing quarter 4 in a few months' time. Okay, I'm going to move the business on then from the where are we? Performance report quarter 3, which we're noting, to 3.3, which is performance framework refresh. And again, that's you, Vicky.
Great. Thanks, Chair. So the performance framework, I'm covering it slightly, and I think Angela's question there relates to this in particular. It's obviously a tool designed to really give us that clarity and focus and assurance around managing performance. So it's much more focused, it's flexible, has that forward-thinking approach where new and emerging issues are considered. This is our second iteration of the performance framework. The first was agreed in 2023, and what we've done is we've refreshed this in line with the current position of Forensic Services and where we are now, the current position across the different areas of Forensic Services from our partners. So it's really important, as I said, that this performance framework aligns very much with various documentation, whether it's our own forensic strategy, and our strategic outcomes, but also the Scottish Government justice outcomes, the strategic aims of Police Scotland, ZOPFS and PERC, etc. So what we have done this time is reviewed the whole document again, and on 2.1 of the covering paper, you will see that the key updates to the document are around the introduction. So again, as I said, a general update reflecting the current position of forensic services. Our equality, diversity and inclusion section, again, there's been a lot of work in this area, so we wanted to make sure that the document actually reflected that in this reiteration. We also note that the joint equality outcomes are being reviewed at this current time, so again, we need to take cognizance obviously of that in terms of the more detail management performance reports that we produce internally and externally. There's also additional evidence for each of the aspects of the performance framework where, our approach to the performance management, that section has been improved as well to have more of a focus on technology and really calls out that importance of technology to drive performance. And we make particular mention of the core operating system in this document, which everyone is aware of. We've mentioned it already again this morning, and that will really drive that efficient processes and continuous improvement. In terms of the sections of the performance framework, there have been additions to those. So in terms of outcome 1, which, just to remind everyone, really focuses on our people, we've put more in there around our culture and behaviours. So the examples, for example, we make reference to corporate parenting, strategic enablers, our daily directors' reports, which are well established in the organisation, but we haven't mentioned it previously in the performance framework. Outcome 2, which focuses on sustainability, adaptability, being prepared for future challenges. And we've built more in there around our operating model transition, where that's going to be a real focus for us in the coming period. Outcome 3, which looks at high quality ethical services. We have now got the MOU, the summary MOU for drugs driving, so we're making reference to that, which is key, and that will be a theme obviously through later on the papers in this meeting. And financial efficiency to include adherence to our yearly plan, which we have. Outcome 4 focuses on collaboration with our partners. So again, we've got additional evidence there around partnership working, which we have included. So just in terms of timescales and intentions here, the intention is once this is approved, we will continue to report performance against our framework to various groups, both internally, but also with our partners through the Forensic Performance Operational Group, the FPOG, the Forensic Performance Improvement Group, the FPIG, and of course the Forensic Committee. I'd just like to take this opportunity again to thank all the staff involved in pulling this new version together for the meeting today, across forensic services, in particular Helen Hayworth and also SP Corporate, who have reviewed it as well in that light as well. So I'll pause for questions, and if there's any more detailed questions, I'll probably pass them over to Helen and other members of the team. Thank you.
Great, thanks very much for that very comprehensive introduction, Vicky. Board members, do you have any comments or questions? Chris.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Vicky. It's a very clear report and very clearly introduced. You obviously touched there in reference to equality, diversity and inclusion, the joint equality outcomes, which are currently being refreshed. And it was really just to, it's not a question, it was really just to underline, obviously, the importance of ensuring that those are fully addressed in the final version of the framework, and it's something that I in particular will be looking very closely at. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Chris. Angela, and then Caroline. Excuse me.
Thank you, and thanks, Vicky. I really welcome this paper. I think it is really clear, and it's great to see the golden thread, as it were, going right through from your strategy right into the performance measures that people are adhering to. It was really on that in terms of the culture within the organisation, forensic services, because for performance to be reported meaningfully like this, it has to be owned by the workforce, and that doesn't happen accidentally. So I just wondered if you wanted to say a wee bit, or you could expand on what measures, what steps you and the senior team take to, you know, cultivate that culture of an adherence to good performance, a high standard of performance, but at the same time seek that reassurance for staff and the career development that you talk about in your paper as well. So there's a balance there to be struck, and I just wondered if you wanted to say something about it.
Yeah, thanks for the question, Angela. And I think it's a multifaceted answer in terms of that approach that we have internally. Just to start off, I think it's a work in progress in terms of performance being really at the key of everything that we do in forensic services. What I would also say is that our people, and we've seen this through surveys and staff engagements, they've got a real passion for the public sector. They've got a real passion for delivering the best forensic science, whatever role you have in the organisation, for our partners and for the communities of Scotland. So that's a really positive starting point, I feel. What we have seen is that with post-mortem toxicology, for example, transitioning over to forensic services, we've seen a real positive culture around performance and meeting deadlines and the importance of that. There's someone there at the end of that whole process who's waiting for a really important result from our teams. And we want to instill more of that in other areas of forensic services. There's a strong look at performance internally. And again, this is where our operating model and that change in management structure for people, our first line managers, our capability team managers, our service delivery managers, really focusing on the staff well-being, obviously, but also that other strand of performance in their teams. And really, we're trying to be better at that, anticipating where there could be demands coming, or we have resource challenges, for example, and trying to get ahead of that. So I would say it's definitely a work in progress, but we're moving in a very positive direction. And again, the performance report I've just went through there as well shows you that we have got a strong performance overall, but we know that there's continuous improvement required. But our systems currently have the ability to delve into the more detail on teams and groups of staff, groups of forensic disciplines, etc., and look at the performance in the area. But it is one of our challenges, which is again why a new core operating system will deliver easier reports in the future. We also have meetings set up across the organisation, again at different levels, so there is that focus on performance at the team level, but also higher up within capabilities, within functions, and obviously at the forensic services level. I'll pause there because I can see Fiona's got her hand up.
Yeah, Fiona.
Thanks, Vicky, and that was a really comprehensive answer. I just really wanted to draw the link into the staff survey results, Angela, in relation to culture, I think in particular, and Vicky's talked a lot there around the culture and driving high performance, and absolutely support Vicky's comments around it being a work in progress, and the change in the management structure is bedding in, but it's still new. It's a new operating model for forensic services, and that supportive coaching approach through the management line is one that we need to absolutely embed around driving performance improvement and focus on making sure that we're delivering the best service to the customer. And sometimes a lot of that comes down to communication and drawing lines around, what really motivates our people around delivering, forensic science in the public service, and about how key performance indicators fit with that overall aim and objective. And the performance framework goes a long way, I think, to doing that. But I think from an inclusivity and a culture around an inclusive working environment where everybody can be their best, this is an area where the staff survey results are really helping us to shape where we need to prioritise further activity around culture development. and how we measure how effective we are being at doing that. I think it's really difficult, but one thing we're really keen to do is to introduce a group of staff that can really hold our feet to the fire, for want of a better expression, around people with lived experience working within forensic services, and how they have shared already their feedback through the staff surveys, but then can work with us to say, well, what activity should we be prioritising? And then is that activity delivering the outcome which we anticipated it would? And do we need to change course? So we're really keen to have a group of staff with that lived experience that really will give us constructive but critical feedback on what we have done and what we want to do moving forward. So I think that will be a really good support for the senior management team in making sure that we're doing the right things to change the culture of the organisation.
Great, thanks very much for that, Fiona. That sounds really interesting. Caroline.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks, Fiona and Vicky. That's been very helpful. And in fact, the question before has just sort of answered quite a lot of what I was going to ask. But I just wanted to say that this is a sea change in where we were in terms of being able to manage that sort of performance. So I wanted to say well done. This has been a big piece of work. I think it gives you a very good framework to keep going with. But as previously said, it is about the staff owning this and driving it through. And my only other thing that I'm thinking really through is there's quite a lot of targets in here. And I'm wondering whether you could sort of subsume some of them into other ones, but also make them a bit smarter. And that's my only kind of thing for you going forward. Because you want this to sort of filter down so that every person who works in forensics understands which part of this plan is theirs and which bit do they. And having actually harder targets is something that's usually quite helpful in terms of doing that. So that would be my only reflections, but I really think you've got the ingredients here to set up a pretty great performance culture, actually, and I wish you every success with it going forward. So thank you for your hard work. It's brilliant.
Great, thanks very much, Caroline. And you've observed the point I was going to make is this is quite a change from where we were not that long ago. And I have to praise the director and your team for how quickly we've managed to progress in that journey. And I'm really looking forward to seeing how we manage this over the next few years. So well done to everyone involved. And we're asked to approve this. So can we agree to approve this? Great, thank you very much. And well done again for this. That then moves us on to item 3.4, which we've talked about already, the drug driving update. And Paul Stewart is here to introduce that. So Paul, welcome and over to you.
Thank you, Chair. And I'll just move straight into the paper. As has already been indicated, I'll build on the Director's report and the fact that I might go into some more detail just around some of the areas that I think will be of interest to the committee. So the attention has already been drawn to the increased demand and what that's meant over the Q3 process. You know, that demand of 958 cases against a capacity of 810, leaving us with that 148 excess in terms of the demand received. Our internal capacity, as you will have noted from the report, and particularly relating to our output, has seen a real positive direction of travel from 2023, where our average output was 109 per month, to 2024, our average came in at 185. This would have been quite significantly higher and was tracking higher until we had our development issues, or our technical issues rather, across August and September. And in 2025, we've only had that first month in terms of January, and we're seeing an improvement on that again, with us meeting the 250 target cases due to the redirecting of resources and the focus on that because of the festive campaign. So in terms of budget, I know that is a question and of interest to the committee. Our budgeted outsourced cases, we budget for 900 cases to be outsourced every year, which gives us a budget, and we've got a budget to manage that. At the moment, we are circa 200 over that, which brings us in with a scheduled outsource overspend of round about the in the region of £45,000. So that is currently scheduled at the moment. In terms of outsourcing, I'll just touch on outsourcing at the moment. We are proactively engaging with the suppliers and our external suppliers. There has been some shift in the market, which has been already referenced through the director's report, but we do and remain confident that we have an ongoing ability to outsource. The size and scale at which we can do that is something that is subject to ongoing discussion with the external suppliers. So we have had recent assurance from the supplier that within the known demand levels that they can meet our existing levels of demand. In terms of performance, you will note that the open cases graph that's within the paper, that backlog and the historical backlog is now clear, and we do have now an enhanced monitoring in place through the new 6-month statutory timeline process, which has been agreed with Police Scotland and the Crown. You also note that there are 7 cases out with that 6-month timeline. That is 1.3% of our total open cases, so it's a very low number, but it's something that we keep a close eye on and monitor on an individual basis. In terms of the TOCS development plan, you will note in the paper that version 3 highlights the 5A method and the introduction of the new drug panels and the training requirements. Version 4 is due to go live in April, and whilst the focus will remain on the 3 areas that I've just mentioned, there is a new element of introducing new equipment for the within the Howden Hall here. That is the QTOF, which is the quantitative time of flight, for those that are interested, and that is a brand new piece of kit which will require method development and will be done in a joint project with our PM TOCS colleagues as well. So the whole focus of the version 4 of the development plan will be about creating more efficient and effective processes in order that we can increase our internal output and our internal capacity. The 6-month statutory timeline, as members will know, came in on the 30th of November. That is in its early stages, but we have an ongoing schedule of engagement with our partners in terms of monitoring that, and we're monitoring that very closely with the Crown and with our Police Scotland colleagues. The engagement between Police Scotland and Forensic Services in this has been very proactive and very much welcomed. Really welcome our support from our police colleagues in that regard. I shall pause there, Chair. I know that this may take some attention and have some questions from the committee, and happy to do so and take any of them in conjunction with any of the other members of the team. So
yeah, I wonder, we've got other partners in attendance today as well. I wonder, we've got Hilary Sloan from Police Scotland. I don't know if you've already made some remarks, Hilary. Do you want to add anything to those at this stage?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Probably just to reiterate what Paul has said already in relation to the collaboration that we have with colleagues within Forensic Services and COPFS as well, and the governance structures that we have in place mean that we're able to have discussions earlier on if there are any issues or areas of concern, and that for me is really important and will form the basis of the management of the drug driving cases as we go forward in 2025.
Yeah, I wonder, can you maybe expand on why there's been such a surge in demand?
So yes, of course, we always have the festive campaign every year. Clearly, we extended it by 2 weeks this year because of evaluation and feedback we'd had from previous years, which may account for some of the increase. But I think probably to say as well that drug misuse is a societal issue and it's not going away. And clearly we have a responsibility to deal with those individuals who do take drugs and then drive. There is a significant amount of work that's required around education and prevention messages as well that we're doing in conjunction with our colleagues in Transport Scotland. And again, that work will continue even once the campaign has now finished for the festive period, because I think it is really important that we highlight the dangers around drug driving and make sure that people are educated, and that will continue, as I said, in conjunction with our partners moving forward.
Great, thank you very much. And your comments about the wider societal issues, I think, are very well put. And we've got Ruth McQuaid here in the call as well. Hi, Ruth. Good morning. Do you want to pitch in anything at this stage?
Did I want to what? Sorry, Paul, I lost the last bit there when I took off mute.
Pitch in, but I mean, do you want to add? Is probably a more elegant way of putting it. Anything at this stage?
Really, not particularly much to add. I mean, it's difficult for us to comment on any issues like such increased demand. We're in a position to respond to whatever comes in that regard. I would just observe that, you know, perhaps as all of us would, from a public perspective, that there's a greater awareness, I would suspect, of the issues related to drink driving than there is of drug driving, and we're still, you know, a way to go there. So nothing else from the Crown's perspective. We're, you know, continuing to work in close partnership with forensics and the police in relation to managing the issue.
Great. Well, thank you very much for that, Ruth. Okay, board members, committee members rather, Caroline and then Mary.
Thanks, Chair, and thank you for the report. That's been very, very helpful in talking it through. And again, I'm just going to do another reflection and just to see how really pleasing it is to see the MOU in action and working well between the partners. I think that's been a massive step forward, certainly in my time here. So I just wanted to say well done for that. But I'm just wondering, in terms of the reflection, because I couldn't agree more with the Chair's reflections and everybody's reflections, which is it is a serious societal issue, and therefore being able to test is hugely important. However, we have a budget and we have capacity, and therefore managing within that will continue, I think, to be a bit of a tension. So I was just wondering if anyone would reflect maybe on not even just the maturity within the MOU, but the maturity within the other partners, because when you've got big budgets, slippage occurs. This is a relatively small increase with 45,000. Is there a maturity to be having discussions with Police Scotland or SPA colleagues or the government around funding that in the interim? I know we're going to do the long-term model, but I'm just wondering in terms of, you know, things slip within big budgets, could be reallocated to forensics. So I'm just wondering if somebody could comment on that maturity really in terms of that piece. Thank you.
Yeah, Fiona Douglas has put her hand up, so I'll maybe come to you, Fiona.
Thank you, and thank you for the question, Caroline. And I think there's really close collaboration and discussion between Forensic Services and Police Scotland in relation to this issue in particular. And I think we all share the same ambition that we want to solve the problem of drug driving on the roads of Scotland. You're absolutely right that Forensic Services has a budget to operate within. We also have, through the MOU, had discussions around what the level of demand is that we would build our revenue budgets around for next financial year. I'm thinking about in particular. So the 250 to 270 sample submission per month is what we have brought into budget setting discussions. And I think in terms of the maturity, absolutely there is a maturity of discussion around how do we expect the demand to continue. And I think it's probably still a wee bit early to be able to answer that question. We've had some really good open discussion with Hillary's colleagues within the Operation Hitch working group to try to answer that very question, but it is really difficult. And there is a greater awareness around use of the roadside testing, which again, it's a really valuable tool for Police Scotland to use. And I think we have the solution to this problem in the long term, which is the long-term sustainable model. And it's no small investment that's required to allow us to be able to deliver that solution. Nevertheless, in the scheme of things, the size and scale of what we're seeking to build that long-term sustainable model is really a case we need to continue to push with Scottish Government colleagues, with colleagues across the whole of the justice sector, because we want to deliver the zero tolerance approach to drug driving on the roads of Scotland Scotland that the Cabinet Secretary articulated so well. So in order to do that, we really do need to make sure that we can deliver the toxicology testing capability that reflects Police Scotland's enforcement strategy, that then complements the education and prevention activity, which again is so important to change society and to make drug driving as socially unacceptable as drink driving has become. So there is absolutely a maturity of discussion. As we progress, I think over the next quarter, and we've got a greater understanding as to whether this level of demand is going to continue, then I think we absolutely need to be looking at next financial year. What is the pressure going to look like around additional outsourcing? More fundamental risk here, though, is if there's insufficient capacity in the UK forensic marketplace to be able to undertake that testing. And I think when we get to that point, and really, I think that is some way away, given the indications that we have had from our outsourcing partner. You know, there is a capacity out there that we can tap into just now. So from a financial perspective, it is a risk, but I think the risk around cases being unable to proceed to prosecution due to there being insufficient capacity in the marketplace, I think that that's an assessment that we would need to make as the year progresses, and we've got a greater understanding as to whether demand is going to continue to increase at the level that we've seen in Q3. And I think it's only if it increases at that same level over the rest of the year that that risk really becomes something that we would need to actively consider. So I think there is good discussion. We continue to have a number of forums where we talk about this, and we work very closely with colleagues in Police Scotland in particular around this demand issue.
Thanks very much for that, Fiona. I've got Chris and then Angela.
Thank you, Chair, and echo what others have said, obviously, about the challenges here, and commend the effort that's being made to respond to those challenges. I just wanted to zone in very specifically, actually, on paragraph 2.10 and those 7 cases, and whether or not you could say any more, Paul. I know you referred to this in your introduction, about how those cases are progressing and the extent to which we can be assured that there will be no such cases of this length moving forward. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much for the question, Chris. And yes, so just to clarify, the 7 cases that are identified within the report are all have the grandfather rights in terms of the 12-month statutory timeline, so they are not at risk of time barring. So I'm fairly content that we will report them within the 12-month statutory timeline. Going forward, in terms of the 6-month statutory timeline, clearly some of them, if the circumstances repeat, then there would be a significant risk of time barring. However, having mentioned previously the discussions that we've had with Police Scotland and the proactive nature of them discussions, we are have a new performance criteria along that 6-month timeline around the submission of cases, how the cases are managed within forensic services, and thereafter how they are reported to the Crown. So as I mentioned earlier, that it's still early stages of that, but that has not prevented regular engagement with Police Scotland around the submission of cases, ensuring that we are receiving the cases. And I won't speak for Police Scotland, but there is an internal recording and reporting mechanism being put in place within Police Scotland to very, very closely monitor that. So early stages in terms of the performance management within the current 6-month timeline, but to answer the specifics around the 7 cases, there are very limited, if any, risk of them time barring because of the previous rights that they have under the 12-month statutory timeline. So hope that answers your question, Chris.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Paul. Angela.
Sorry, a bit slow there. Thanks, Chair. I've got a couple of questions, so I'll maybe just run through them, and I think there might be a few people that might be able to answer them. Fiona mentioned earlier the timeline in developing the long-term sustainable model, being around 3 years. So I just wondered what consideration or what steps we might look at to condense that a bit. You know, I'm just thinking about the risk that we currently see on the roads, and whether or not it's possible to reduce that, collapse that in any way. I understand that there might be risks associated with that, but is there something that we could do that would be more of an iterative programme? And in particular, the demand forecasting, and I know that's really, really important, but at what point do we think that we might have sufficient information to make a reasonable assessment of the demand going forward? And one of my final points, I might come back in after Mary, because I think Mary had her hand up, was the incorporation, and you did mention this, Fiona, the incorporation into the full business case of digital colleagues. But I'm just thinking, with all the world of AI now, what might we look at to try and reduce timescales either for processing or reporting or whatever it may be by either AI or other digital means? I'll stop there, Paul, just now.
Thank you. Fiona, you've raised your hand up. Presumably you want to respond to this.
I'll have a stab, and then I'll bring my colleague Sam in to give a view around the long-term sustainable model. So the timescale is a lengthy one, Angela, as you've set out. At the conclusion of the Resources Committee, the indication from Resources is that the full business case needs to progress once we've secured the investment for the full 10-year duration of the project that's put forward, to both develop the full business case and then implement the option that we have recommended. But there will absolutely be opportunities within that, I am sure, to reduce the timescale. We need to work with our colleagues within Police Scotland Change in terms of them supporting the transition from the initial business case to full business case, as well as colleagues in procurement and estates, because the option would require the purchase of or a new laboratory to be able to undertake this activity. So it's a big project. It includes the introduction of automated robotic type platforms. So it is utilising new technology. I would say it probably doesn't stretch as far as AI, but I'll let Sam come in and offer a view on that at the moment. But it certainly does use existing technology platforms which are used elsewhere within forensic science. DNA profiling is the obvious example of that, where it's similar type technology that can be used in this area. So there are opportunities for us, I think, to reduce that overall timescale, but I think we need to progress further into the planning to allow that to happen. I'll hand over to Sam in just one moment, but before I do, just in relation to demand forecasting, Police Scotland have done a really robust demand forecast that sits within the initial business case for this service, and really it looks at what would the demand look like if we were to introduce the roadside testing to local policing officers, and a huge piece of analysis has been done. So we've got a really robust demand forecast in relation to the long-term sustainable model, which is based on that assumption around local policing officers having the testing capability. The challenge we have at the moment in relation to demand forecasting is a different one, because it's really about, well, understanding why the demand has spiked over Q3 and whether that's going to sustain. But we still have the same approach in place with Police Scotland in relation to roads policing officers undertaking the testing capability. So we need to understand that trend and do a little bit more work to see if that trend is going to maintain in the short term. But be assured that there is a robust demand piece that has been done to forecast how that's going to change if the Police Scotland strategy around local policing officers testing is brought in. But I'll just perhaps hand across to Sam, if that's okay, Chair, to give a little, some insights around the project itself. Sam.
Thank you, Fiona, and thank you, Angela, for the question. Yeah, I mean, to build on what Fiona was saying, I have no doubt there would be opportunity to expedite the development and implementation of the long-term sustainable solution. But I think it's probably worth bringing to life the scale of this proposed project. So it of course requires an increase in headcount. So we need to recruit, we need to train, and we need to develop individuals into those roles. We would not be able to fit the capacity within our existing estate. So we need to identify suitable facilities. We need to get those ready. We need to build, and we need to bring in the correct instrumentation. One area, and I know my colleague Craig is on the call, that will be absolutely key to this as well, is the time to get the systems, processes and instrumentation accredited, which is a requirement for much of the work that is undertaken within criminal toxicology. That said, everything is of course doable, and as Fiona alluded to, I would suggest that when we develop the FBC, we, like the IBC, create scenarios as to what could be done within shorter timelines, with the long-term ambition of having the whole provision of service in place to meet what ultimately is the well-articulated demand that Police Scotland colleagues have given us. I hope that adds a bit of flavour to Fiona's previous words.
You content with that, Angela?
Yeah, no, that's really good. Not for debate just now, but the only other comment, observation that I would make is how we build in a review of the end-to-end process, because there are a number of stakeholders in here as well. So the ultimate aim is to make sure that, you know, people are deterred and then they're detected if they use drugs and drive. And I just wonder about the different elements, the different stakeholders in that process, making sure that, you know, when we get to the end, people do think really seriously the way that they do now about alcohol before they get behind the wheel, having taken drugs, but also then about the prosecution process that will then follow. So, but it's more an observation, Paul, than anything. But I see Fiona's got her hand up.
Yes, Fiona.
If I could just add some assurance in relation to that, through the issues which we have had with drug driving toxicology provision, we have done an awful lot of work across the system to understand the end-to-end process around drug driving, and I would say that this is the area of forensic science where we have the best visibility and understanding of that end-to-end system. And that's further complemented from an improvement perspective by the HMICS review that was undertaken and the recommendations that were raised in that review, which specifically look at how we drive that improvement across the system rather than just looking at the constituent parts of it. So, for example, it looks at how the samples are taken all the way through to their receipt in the laboratory, and how we use systems and technology to support that, how we track samples through that whole process all the way through to them being reported to the Crown and the justice system. There's also detailed analysis captured within those recommendations to understand the problem of drug driving better, and I think that will stand us in really good stead in terms of having a baseline to be able to assess some of these improvements within the long-term sustainable model against.
Thanks very much for that, Fiona. Thanks for everyone's comments and questions. I've just got a closing observation before I move the business on. There's so much, so many things that forensic science are doing, or forensic services are doing, that are so positive, and the work is excellent. The thing that keeps me awake at night is the bit that we don't have any control over, and that's the demand and the outsourcing. And I think particularly, you know, now we've only got one company we can go to, and we don't have any control over them except the contract. And in the past, sometimes we've fallen to the bottom of the to-do list for them. And that's what really concerns me. And I think that's one of the reasons why I'm such a strong advocate for getting the long-term sustainable model into government, hopefully approved by government and implemented, because I want us to be in charge of our own destiny on this. And at the moment, we're not to the extent I would like to be. So just to say, if we can get that finished as quickly as we can, I know you're limited in what we can do with that. speed, but it is hugely important to us. And we need to work out also how to influence in the wider societal issues, because this is a major problem out there, and we do need to change people's mindset and behaviour to make everyone safe when we're walking out in the streets, which is clearly part of what we're doing here today. So anyway, just to return to the recommendations we've got, I think we're asked to, if you bear with me, I've got to find it again. Asked to note this, are we?
Well, I've just noticed that Mary's got her hand up. Sorry to interrupt.
I'm sorry, Mary. I can't see
Oh, no apology, Paul. I don't know what's happening. I've got a very unfamiliar screen today, and I'm really struggling with it.
I'm seeing hands being put down, but I'm not seeing them up on the screen. And so I do apologise, Mary. Apologies to anyone else that I've missed.
Not at all. I mean, I think the discussion's been really, really good and really helpful. A lot of very good responses as well. So the really important thing is, just as you say, how do we get into the situation where we're satisfied we've got a sustainable model, and we've had good discussion about that. My question from a while ago was much in relation to the question that Chris asked about the table on page 5 and of the open caseload. So it was a very simple question. It won't take long to answer, I'm sure, but it was about the fact that we've had a very good direction of travel in relation to getting ourselves down to having everything within the 6 months time limit that we now have to work to. But currently we have a small number of cases, 7, which are out with that. And we've heard that they're not likely to end up being time barred, which is very good. But could I just ask generally to what extent late submission of samples is a problem and is impacting on performance? And maybe it's something Hilary could help us understand about why we would have such a delay between the incident and the submission of the material.
Thanks for that. Hilary.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And yes, of course, I'll provide just a bit of an insight. So we've been quite lucky in the last few weeks to be able to have a new Power BI dashboard, which has really helped us to understand more fully in relation to every single case, every single submission that's coming in, and making sure that we're managing all of those, so we can now much quicker look at cases where there may be an issue with submission and engage directly with the officer and their line manager to in effect chase the submission on. So that in itself has been really helpful for us. Also, we have sent out a memo in the name of ACC Johnson around submissions and making sure that officers are doing that as quickly as possible because of the change to the statutory time limit. So there is a lot of focus from Police Scotland's perspective around those submissions and making sure we're getting them in on time, which hopefully will show a difference moving forward. Clearly, there are some cases you've highlighted there that are a bit longer, but hopefully with the change in the statutory time limit, we will be in a much better position to really focus in on those cases where, for whatever reason, quite often it's human error, but it's just making sure that we're all over it, for want of a better term, and engaging directly with those officers and line managers to reiterate the importance of submission as soon as they're able to.
Thank you very much. That's really helpful.
And
grateful for that response.
Douglas wants to come in at this point as well. Fiona.
Just to add to that and to make one other point, Chair, if that's okay, with regards to submissions, Police Scotland have done a lot of work in relation to the sample in the laboratory, and we are seeing substantial improvement. We've also got really good visibility of data now, and I think that really helps to look at where interventions can be targeted if that's what's required to improve the timeliness of submissions. Additionally, the drug driving MOU sets out what we in the laboratory will do with really extensive delays in sample submission. So with the statutory time limit changes, if a sample is received in the laboratory and it is 6 months old on receipt, then it would be rejected at the laboratory. So, you know, there are a number of different measures that are in place in relation to late submissions. Just, Chair, I just wanted to make one other point before we close this discussion in relation to the long-term sustainable model, and just to reinforce that at present Forensic Services does not have any assurance around the investment in the long-term sustainable model. We are also in discussions with Police Scotland in relation to the digital division, the change resource that's required to progress from initial business case to full business case. So there are a number of aspects that are outside of Forensic Services control at this moment in relation to how the long-term sustainable model can be progressed. So we're working very hard with colleagues to make sure that we are making good progress there, and we will be discussing with Police Scotland in and around the prioritisation of this change in and amongst all of the other change activity that Police Scotland are progressing. And we need to continue to make the case, working with the accountable officer in relation to the investment that is required in the long-term sustainable model. But I did just want to make the point that at this moment in time, it is not within Forensic Services control to dictate what the timescale for the long-term sustainable model will be.
Thanks very much for that, Caroline. Sorry, Fiona. Okay, we're just asked to discuss this, and your points about the hurdles for long-term sustainable models and the unknowns, I think is well made. These do need to be bottomed out as we're going forward. And clearly, if we've not got the cash, if we're not got the budget to do that, then that does limit us substantially in what we're doing. But that has to be the prize that we aim for. We have to make as strong a case to government for the investment as we possibly can, because I think there's a very strong case to be made for this. Okay, we were asked to discuss this, and I think we've given it a good discussion. We've sought assurance from you, we've received those assurances. It's still a difficult position, there's still risks there, but we've got a good partnership approach to this issue, I think, and hopefully we can move on to something that is a bit more sustainable than we've managed so far. So thanks everyone for your input into this. I'm not seeing any other hands raised at this point, so I'm going to move us on to the next item, which is the HMICS review, and I think that's you again, Paul.
Yes, that is true.
Yeah, the assurance review of forensic toxicology.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
We've still got 3.5, the financial monitoring report to do.
Oh, I do beg your pardon. Sorry, all over the place today. Sorry. Yes, 3.5. Thanks, Colette. Forensic Services Financial Monitoring Report, item 3.5, and that's Fiona Douglas. Fiona, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. The report is included with the papers for the meeting, and I'll take it as read. The summary as set out in the covering paper relates to the position of Forensic Services against the revenue, the capital and the reform budget at this point within the financial year. So from a revenue perspective, the Q3 net expenditure forecast is forecasted to be overspent to budget by a year end of around about 270,000, which is with underspends. That is offset. The total overspend is offset against underspends against the pay budget. So it represents 0.6% of the overall budget for the financial year in total. We have had a number of discussions as senior management team in relation to plans to mitigate that 270,000 forecast overspend, and there are a number of areas being considered, with a set out in page 5 of the report attached to this paper. We are confident alongside finance colleagues that we can come in on a balanced budget by year end, and there are a number of different areas which we're considering to ensure that that is the case. From a capital perspective, we are forecasting a spend of 0.8 million against a budget of 1 million, which is a 20% underspend against the full year budget. That's really as a result of underspends, which we're forecasting against, particularly some fingerprint related project work, which some of which is outside the timescale, is some of which is outside of our control, and has been pushed into the next financial year for delivery. So From a revenue, from a reform perspective, the overall spend is forecast as flat as compared to the previous forecast, which is 0.3 million under budget. That reflects some less staff resources being available than required through the majority of the financial year. So I'll pause there, Chair, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thanks for that. It's an odd place to be in, because every time I've been on this committee, we've always had underspends at the end of the financial year, and who knows, that may yet happen. I'm curious about the impact on service delivery, and I'm also curious about the impact it will have if we're delaying any expenditure. What will that do? Are we backing up for next year? Are we creating problems for next year?
There is a risk that we will move some costs from this financial year to next. We are considering that alongside the capital investment plans for next year and associated revenue impact that some of those capital projects that may have. So we will consider the risk of moving some of this into next financial year as part of our internal efficiencies planning for next financial year, alongside the budget when that's finalised and provided to us. So there are a number of areas which we can look at. I mean, some of the key areas which have no impact on service delivery really are around third-party cost recovery, which is where we've done work or provided services for other customers, and ensuring that we are making sure that we're capturing all of the costs associated with that. Some of the more impactful areas really around delaying external recruitment. So there's a small amount of external recruitment where we've got staff due to start before the end of the financial year, which will move into next financial year. I don't anticipate that will have a significant impact. Logistics is an area where we've seen quite a significant overspend against our contract. And really that's more impactful in terms of our inability or reducing the amount of logistics activity between our different locations. So we're considering all of those against acceptable levels of risk from a service perspective, and we will anticipate that we will recover that potential overspend position by the end of the financial year.
Great, thanks for that. Any questions from any members? Observations? Not seeing them. Okay, well, we're asked to note this, and we'll obviously get an update as we go forward. So thanks very much for that, Fiona. Now that moves us on to the HMICS assurance review. Oh, sorry. Someone wanted to come in? No? Great. That then moves us on to the HMICS review. So, Paul.
Okay, thanks, Chair. Again, I'll paper submitted, so I'll just touch on a couple of points, and clearly there is some context here around the previous paper around drug driving, and I think just as a general observation that for me within this area of work, the HMICS review has been really helpful in aiding that continuous improvement, and I think the Director alluded to that earlier on. So progress has been fairly steady. We had a really good meeting with Police Scotland and all those involved last week, out with the normal formal structures in order to ensure that we focused on the evidence gathering requirement and the submission of that to HMICS. So there's a need for us to ensure that we are prioritising that and getting that submitted to HMICS for their review in terms of seeking closure of some of the recommendations. There are some heavy reliance, or there is some heavy reliance on the new process, the 6-month timeline, and the assurance that we can provide from that. And with that being in the early stages, that requires a bit of a review of performance. Therefore, it's just slightly early to move to recommend closure. But I do envisage that in advance of the April Strategic Oversight Board, where the action plan is scrutinised on a line-by-line basis, I anticipate that a number of recommendations will have had evidence submission through the normal process, and we will be discussing and hoping to recommend some of them for closure, subject, of course, to the agreement of HMICS and their scrutiny of that. So I know that Mr Naylor's on the call as well. We've had some productive discussions on this. I'm fairly content that that the actual action plan itself is is moving along, but I do think we can do a little bit more in terms of ensuring that we are submitting evidence and keeping them up to date in terms of reviewing some of the timelines. So it's a work in progress, but I'm fairly content with where we're at this stage, and I'm hoping by the next committee meeting in May to have seen some movement on this. So that that concludes my input, Chair. Happy to take any questions, comment, or otherwise.
Thanks very much. I do see Craig Naylor there. So Craig, I wonder, do you want to add anything at this stage?
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Paul. We do work very closely with Paul and the team under Fiona's direction. So we're pleased with the progress being made. We had a very productive meeting recently with COPFS colleagues about some issues and are waiting some paperwork back from them about one of the recommendations that might allow us to close that, which has been a bit tricky. But I'm hopeful we can get some paperwork from them to do that in the not too distant future. But in terms of progress, good progress being made. Paul has got a real grip in it, and we're very grateful for all the work from everyone across forensics and other partners to make the progress that we've seen. That was about it, Chair. Thank you.
Great, thanks very much for that. Board members, any questions or comments? Angela.
Thanks, Paul. Yeah, well done and a really good report again. It was and very thorough. So so thank you for this all involved. There was a couple of points I just wanted clarification on, items that had actually been closed, but just for my own information. So point 2 on page 6 of the report, the appendix, I should say. So point 2 talks a bit about auditable mechanisms to assess the impact of new legislation, and it's been closed off. And I just wondered what the outcome was of that. And it was a similar issue on point 6. The evidence in other jurisdictions to assess the opportunities to reclaim forensic services costs. And again, further dialogue took place with HMICS and the recommendation has been closed. So I just would like an update on those 2 items. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Paul.
Okay, thanks for that question, Angela. I will need to look at the 2 items in detail. I see Fiona's raised their hand. I think they have been closed off, and I'm not aware of the full detail given my involvement of the report and when I arrived in the organisation, but it looks helpfully like the director and Craig are both looking to come in. So
yeah, I'll maybe get the director first and then Craig. Or hang on, no, Craig first, because you've closed the recommendations off. Sorry.
That works for me.
Thanks all. Angela, item number 2, there is a mechanism now in place where there is consideration given of all new legislation coming into play that is looked at by both the SPA and Police Scotland. I don't have the exact detail at my fingertips, but we were assured that the mechanism that is now in place looks at all aspects of legislation, including the impact of it, DEI issues around it, and the financial impact. The mechanism, I think, if I recall, Tom Halpin had a handling from the SPA perspective, and has satisfied us that the issues that we saw with this legislation and with some other bits of legislation, including the PECS bill that is about to become law, are all now being looked at in a much more rigorous manner than they were previously. I don't know if that answers your question number 2. If not, I'm sure between Paul and I we can find the submissions that were made at the time. But that was closed, I think, last summer.
Thank you. That's really good to know for a variety of reasons. Thank you.
Okay, and number 6, this is an interesting one, and I think that it almost sits within the too difficult basket in terms of looking at the wider aspect of charging that is in place in some places, including the south of Ireland. We discussed with Lynn Brown and others at some length about how much work is proportionate, and it was proposed to us by the SPA that the effort that would be taken would not probably give us an outcome that we were expecting. So we agreed at that point that rather than wasting money with little chance of COPFS and others being able to bring some form of capability into this space, that we would pause at that point and not push it any further. So it was a proportionate response to what we suggested.
Thank you.
Great, thanks for that. Can I ask about the reforecast dates? We've got a number of, I think it's 11-week forecast dates, but we don't seem to have, you know, that I think, bear with me, I think there's 11 that have gone past the reforecast dates. So I wonder, can we maybe get an explanation, and when do you reckon those will be closed off?
So I can come in there, Chair. That was one of the key purposes of our meeting last week, was to review the dates and the closed off dates, and to establish and identify the evidence requirements that are needed to ensure the HMICS that the work has been done and evidenced in terms of closing some of the recommendations. So as part of that update, we are now going to fully review the plan and put the new dates in with the justification and commentary that will support that. So that was part of the work that was undergoing last week, and because we recognised that the dates were not quite where they needed to be.
Okay, thanks for that. Okay, any other comments or questions from members before I move this on? Oh, super. Okay, I think we're noting this, so that then moves us on to Forensic Services Change Programme Update, and that's Joanna Tierney. Welcome, Joanna. Joanne, beg your pardon.
No problem. Thank you, Chair. The paper has been submitted as part of the paper submissions, so I will take the paper as read and just call out a few of the highlights. So overall, the change programme roadmap is looking, the majority of activity is tracking green against the milestone delivery plans, and the high level milestone delivery plan was included as one of the appendix in the paper at Appendix A. We have one element of our operating model implementation plan that is tracking amber, and that is the integration of post-mortem toxicology, and I'll cover that in more detail when I come to that section. As we've already heard, we continue to focus on realising the longer term benefits of an integrated toxicology service, and the initial business case for the long-term sustainable solution for toxicology, as you've heard, was presented to the Resources Committee in December. In terms of our operating model, the capability structure is becoming more fully embedded across the organisation, and we have moved forward with mixed discipline teams established now at all sites, and starting to then plan for how we'll realise the opportunities that mixed discipline teams afford us in terms of prioritisation of casework and routing. Our new search and recovery laboratories at Aberdeen and Edinburgh have also now been well established and received a positive recommendation for accreditation at our recent UCAS assessment. So the go live plan for those laboratories is being tracked and agreed with our head of quality and assurance. Operating model as well, we're also moving into phase 4 for operating model, which will commence in April 2025. What we're looking for in phase 4 is to understand how far we've come in the journey of our operating model, what gaps remain, what we can do about those gaps, and how we will progress through implementation and plan for project closure, given the financial constraints with which we've had to operate. And so key activity will be mapped out, and consolidating the implementation of the operating model and really working hard to just embed that and start realising some of the benefits that we've got associated with that project. FS cause and data migration is now tracking green against the replan, and highlight activity there is we are working towards an April date for the launch of the invitation to tender to the market. A lot of really good work has been done in that space, and we're working hard to make sure that we've consolidated the requirements, and we know exactly what we're looking for when that invitation to tender goes out. I'd like to thank our Police Scotland colleagues as well for supporting us in terms of advice and guidance around data migration strategies for that project. That's a key piece of the activity as well. So as I've said, moving on in a little bit more detail around the operating model, we're looking at phase 4, which will see the establishment of specific work streams aimed at delivering the timeliness and efficiency gains that we've associated with the implementation of our operating model, and we will be setting up a work stream to look at the flow of drugs casework and its integration across the new operating model as well. Our Police Scotland Portfolio Assurance team undertook an independent health check of the operating model project. As you will be aware, this is a project that's been running for a number of years now, and we will be doing a formal post-implementation review at the conclusion of the project, but we were keen to invite our portfolio assurance colleagues to do an assessment of how we were progressing so far. The review gave an overall green amber assessment for the project and recognised the significant progress that has been made since the reallocation of critical portfolio research to the change programme, which we have enjoyed from Police Scotland. Thank you from in recent months. Work to finalise the transition approach and impact assessment for the integration of postmortem toxicology continues, being very positive engagement with union colleagues, and the finalised approach to the case for change is being agreed, and that has caused some slippage on the original timeframes, but we are confident that that will now remain on track to move forward through the formal consultation process. In terms of our forensic services core operating system, we have included at Appendix B a high-level indicative phasing activity and timeline for the FBC full business case submission, and we still are on track for that to be submitted through its governance route in December of this year. We've had a market engagement activity has now concluded, and 3 organisations presented in a series of stakeholder workshops. The output of those workshops, we've gone back to the suppliers for some further information, and the output of those workshops are being collated and consolidated into a document that will be shared with senior management team and partners in due course. As I've mentioned, the work on the consolidation of functional and non-functional requirements continues, and we have a 2-day go-no-go workshop scheduled for key business leads and our external consultant support early in March to confirm the inclusion of the requirements in the invitation to tender. And as I've already mentioned, Police Scotland have provided much welcomed opportunities for shared learning, particularly in the space of the data migration strategy. Moving on to our data governance project, we are making plans for project closure with the data governance project, as the framework for monitoring that is now firmly embedded within the business, with compliance owners identified at both service delivery manager and operational crime manager level. We've delivered that framework and seen significant improvement in our compliance level around reduction in file size, retention and aging of files. There are some outstanding system developments for compliance with the data protection legislation, which are planned for delivery in June, July 26, but our information management officer is content with the plan for those system developments, which again has facilitated the closure of this project and this transition into business as usual, where progress against that plan will be monitored. We continue also to make progress now on our research, development and innovation strategy. We've had a series of internal workshops, and I'm working with colleagues in SPA corporate and cyber with the establishment of a series of knowledge exchange events in March 2025 to inform the RD&I strategy, which we hope to present before the committee at a future meeting. You will also see included in the benefits realisation section and the Appendix D and E outlines the new visualisation of reporting against the benefits. We've made significant progress on a reprofile of the benefits and making it clear to business owners in terms of the monitoring of those. What we intend to do as part of our phase 4 activity is to do a gap analysis on how far we have come with implementation of the operating model, how far we have still to go, and the impact of financial constraints on the areas of the operating model that may not be able to be progressed at this stage. And it is our intention to, as I say, carry out a gap analysis to understand when benefits from the operating model can be fully realised and provide a timeline of an indicative timeline around that event. The report contains some highlights in terms of benefits already realised, and as I said, you can see that at Appendix E of the report. I have no further comments to make on the report and happy to take any queries or questions that may arise.
Okay, thanks very much, Joanne, for that very comprehensive run through the change programme. I don't personally have any questions. Does any other member of the committee have any questions for Joanne? Caroline.
Thank you, Chair. And as always, Joanne, thanks very much for this report. It's very in-depth and very helpful. So thank you for that. I think we're coming on massively in terms of that benefits piece. So I want to say well done. You know, that's one of my constant refrains over the last 8 years, but I think you're doing a great job there. I had 2 questions on that section of the report. One was around the deciding in the budget planning to not continue with funding for investing in the next phase, I suppose, of the new operating model, and more or less to focus on consolidating. And I just wondered, you talked there about being able to do a gap analysis. I wonder if we have assessed the opportunity cost of not doing that in terms of not being able to get there a bit quicker. When do you think we'll be getting there a bit quicker? And what were the sort of reasons behind that? Is it solely down to money that we're not doing that? And really the sort of strategy then, I suppose, to get that finally over the line. And my second question, and it's really just around, because you articulate in 2.4.5 a nice table of benefits that have got some harder ones in, but I'm just going to encourage you there to just be more specific about them. So for instance, there's one there about metrics of hang on, wait till I just go back to my report and I'll tell you, because then I'll be able to tell you properly. I've got too many tabs open. So for instance, one of the benefits is faster delivery of intelligence results for volume / less serious crime. So that's a 50% reduction in turnaround time. That's great. And then you've got your data there. And actually, what we'd be really interested in is to see, well, what have you done with that? So that could be we are able to do 50% more cases now, or we've been able to reduce the team by 50% and reallocate them to other work, or et cetera, et cetera. So do you understand what I mean? Just being slightly more granular about these benefits and the actual benefits and how that's been reinvested, I suppose, within the business, or efficiencies realised, or whatever. Does that make sense to you? So I think just carrying on to slightly get sort of a little bit more specific about what we're doing with that would be great.
Yes.
Thank you.
Absolutely, Caroline, and I would like to personally thank you for the time that you've taken off with the committee meetings to support this development of the benefits reporting. And there is still work to be done, but I feel we're getting there slowly. Yes, with regard to your second point in terms of the granularity, I think that that's something very much that we want to look at in phase 4. When we have realised the benefits, it's really getting that visibility, and I think the refreshed performance framework as well will help us. It's really around tracking and linking those areas of the business up and getting that that visual representation of where this goes and what that means. I think having identified benefits owners at the appropriate level in the organisation, team manager, our service delivery managers, our capability team managers, we're really starting to educate them on the whole benefits piece, and they will be able to then make those links for us. So we're hoping to really develop in that space. I see Fiona has her hand up as well, but in terms of the operating model and the decision not to progress, very much where we are with the operating model now is around the increase in headcount numbers. And so in light of financial challenges and the increase in headcount, we are utilising our resource and recruitment prioritisation process to identify those areas of the business and the implementation of the operating model where we need to invest in the operating model numbers, but where areas of the business, if there's been a change in demand portfolio or anything like that, where we can reprioritise the recruitment. So that's an ongoing process that we are working with the heads of function and the business to look at that. I'll let Fiona come in though.
Yeah.
If I could just add a wee bit to Joanne's comments there. I think the two questions are really linked, Caroline, in my mind. I think you're absolutely right that the benefits is quite an inward focus around how the operating model has delivered benefits. And I think the piece of work that Joanne alluded to in terms of going back to the principles that were set out in the full business case, you know, why is it important if forensic services delivers acquisitive crime work faster? And the reasons for that were set out in the business case was because we believe that there can be increased detections. We believe that ultimately, if we can deliver forensic intelligence faster, we can prevent acquisitive crime from happening because there's a swift intervention, particularly around individuals that are committing multiple offences, in that detections or identifications can be provided to Police Scotland to allow an improvement in detection. So I think we're quite a long way from extending our benefits realisation into looking at, well, this is what forensic services are doing differently, and are we then achieving the benefit that we expected to see that was set out in the business case? And I think that's really where this review of going back to the principles is really important. And I think that then leads into the first part of your question, which is absolutely it's delayed from a financial perspective at the moment. But in terms of what would the impact be if we delivered the full benefit of the speed of forensic intelligence in terms of prevention, in terms of increased detections, particularly around acquisitive crime, where we know there's a challenge around policing resources and where we believe that forensic science can make a big impact. And therefore that comes into the, we'll actually invest here. And you'll make a disproportionate. So I think the two go hand in hand. So we need to extend the benefits realisation piece at a higher level rather than into the weeds of each of the individual benefits. And that will then, I think, lead into, well, where are we going with this? You know, we've not delivered everything that we said we would because of the financial constraints that we've experienced. And therefore, if that further investment was to become available, then where would this model ultimately offer further opportunity to support the new model for policing more than anything? And I think there's also a time here for us to make sure that we're feeding into those discussions to Police Scotland around how we utilise forensic science differently in the future, that the operating model, you know, provides the flexibility to do.
Yeah, I think that's very sensible, actually, just given the technological advances there's going to be in everything from digital forensics, etc., and how's that going to all feed through into how you're operating. So yeah, well, I wish you well with it because you've come a long way and you are really starting to get a grip of it. So I just want to pay testament to the work you're doing and to wish you well with it. But just to underline, getting really granular about it is going to be really important to get you the continued investment to make these changes. So yeah, so but you know that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Caroline. Katharina.
Thank you. No, thank you very much for the report and for the very comprehensive update. And again, just to echo what Caroline was saying, it definitely feels like, I mean, there's just so much more kind of grip and control around this just now. So it's, yeah, like years ahead, I think, from kind of a few years ago. I had a relatively high-level question, just trying to link that back to one of the previous papers which we covered in the committee earlier around finances. So again, I'm just mindful of the fact that obviously, you know, my understanding is that this activity is reflected, is being financed through the transformation budget and to a degree the capital budget as well. So considering that we are saying that there is likely to be an underspend at the end of this year, I was just wondering what the impact of that is on the progress of the change activity, if any.
In terms of the reform and transformation capital ask, we are on track in terms of our reform bids. We have the bids that we've put in for the reform, but there's very strict criteria around what can be progressed through a reform and transformation budget ask. Operating model, as we've said, quite a lot of the required investment is in an increase in headcount, which is a year-on-year revenue cost for the business, and we would need a separate funding for that. Around what can progress through a reform. Excuse me, sorry, I'm getting this playback on my duplicate. Can you hear that? No. Apologies. For the capital spend, we are on track because those are the transformation budget allows for one-off spends that directly impact on transform. We utilise the revenue transformation budget to support the allocation of the Police Scotland change resource that we've got, and some backfill opportunities for workstream leads that we've seconded from the business into that. But for a permanent increase in headcount is not something that can be progressed through the transformation budget, and we would therefore require the extra investment or to provide self-investment year-on-year opportunities from within forensic services for that operating model change.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification. Thank
Great.
you.
Thanks very much for that. We're asked to note the progress on the change programmes, which I think we've done, and we've had good questions. So can I suggest then we move the business on? The next item we've got is the digital forensics next steps and timeline for progression, and that's a verbal report from Chief Superintendent Conrad Trickett. Welcome, Chief Superintendent Trickett. Over to you.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, colleagues. Nice to be back. We asked if this could just be a verbal update on the written report that we provided to the August Forensic Services Committee based on the level of progress and the level of additional detail we would be able to provide members with, and that was kindly agreed by the Chair, so thank you for that, Chair. You will recall, hopefully, that we brought in August a revised approach to the accreditation timeline for ISO accreditation of digital forensic labs, which indicated that Aberdeen would be in early 2026, about a year from now. The challenges that we'd been facing predominantly were in two main areas. One was around our UCAS engagement and the experience and advice that they had given us. Once we'd been able to engage, the legal side of that took considerably longer than we anticipated, as I reported last time. And it's only in the last 6 months that we've really had some good engagement with the UCAS liaison officer who's now appointed to us to learn from their experience in terms of carrying out accreditation with similar labs in England and Wales, and the different approach to that timeline that came out of those discussions. So that's still on track in terms of that revised timeline. There was also the acknowledgement that our team needed to grow in terms of technical quality assurance officers, which is a skill set that we didn't have within the existing team. We have made progress with that. We've had permission to create those posts, and the funding of those posts and the repurposing of revenue funding is an ongoing piece of work at the moment, so that we can start to go out to advert and recruit for those two individuals to the team for technical assurance. I also spoke last time about the existing team, the existing quality assurance team, and 2 out of the 3 members of staff had moved on from the organisation. We are still running with one vacancy. Unfortunately, the last recruitment process was unsuccessful due to vetting issues, and so we've gone back out to advert and are hoping to get that turned around over the next couple of months to get that team back up to full speed. So clearly those resourcing challenges have impacted on the progress of some of the work. That said, you will recall that we've used a term called steady state. And this is all about getting the working practices and approaches right down to the detail of the work each analyst does, to a nationally consistent approach. Previously, they'd worked very much as 5 separate labs, and so a big chunk of this work was moving them all towards a nationally consistent approach. Aberdeen and Inverness have been running in that steady state since the last time I reported to you, with both Glasgow and Edinburgh, which obviously are bigger labs. We're working continually with those labs to get them to steady state by the summer of this year. And then finally, Dundee will be brought into that steady state by the end of this year, which will take us all into then the accreditation period thereafter. And we have learnt an awful lot on this journey that we're on with ISO accreditation. We captured some of those lessons in terms of in September of last year, and we'll carry out further lessons learned processes as we go on. So those are the sort of headlines from the written report I provided last August, and hopefully gives you some assurance that we are moving forward slowly but steadily to get that steady state this year, and then looking forward to Aberdeen Lab starting its accreditation journey early next year. Thank you, Chair. Happy to take any questions.
Thanks very much for that. Any questions from anyone? Seeing anything? Okay. No, well, thank you very much. You're getting off lightly. Can we note the verbal report, and we'll hear more in due course. Okay, that then moves us on to item 7, which is the committee effectiveness. So Vanessa, you're introducing that, so thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. So the committee effectiveness process plays an important role, and it offers some insight to support the authority's commitment to continuous improvement of our governance arrangements in particular. So all of the committees undertake this annual self-assessment process to consider how they are performing against the terms of reference. In turn, that information and insight informs the committee and member development programme, work plans, and the certificate of assurance process, which each committee is required to submit to the Audit, Risk and Assurance Committee as part of the annual report and accounts process. Members will note from the paper that we have enhanced this year's process. We've invited the views of stakeholders who are listed at paragraph 1.2 and to offer their assessment and views. Overall, the results for Forensic Services Committee are extremely positive. There are very few areas of concern being raised by members or areas for improvement that have been identified. While stakeholders were invited, there was only 3 stakeholders who chose to respond to our survey, none of which provided feedback specific to the Forensic Services Committee. So, Chair, the purpose today is for committee members to discuss the report, the results, just identify any other areas for improvement and confirm whether you're satisfied that the committee has discharged its terms of reference for the 24-25 period to date. Happy to take any questions.
Great, thanks. Any questions for Vanessa? Not seeing any. Can I ask, I'm looking at the submissions, the equalities, human rights and community impacts being reflected in reports, and that's kind of got 2 that strongly agree and nobody else does, or has, they're unsure. Is this an area that we think we need to beef up on?
Yes, there's a whole range of things that we have in train to try and address that. At the most tactical level, we are looking at looking at the templates for board and committee papers to more explicitly ask authors to explain what impact assessments have taken place. So it won't simply be as it stands just now, no, there are no equalities impacts. We will give them prompts to remind them of the various duties that apply, and they have to explicitly state yes or no or include information. We think that will help, as will providing guidance and filling out the papers to support them to do that.
Yeah, and I'm also seeing the focus on organisational culture. I think that's the other side of the coin from human rights and equalities impact. I think they're kind of very, very closely aligned. So, okay, thanks for that. Any questions? Any other questions from members on this? No? I'll tell you, if you give me 1 second, I'll find my notes. Yeah, I'm looking at the next steps, and I've got a note saying that can the committee agree that I, as committee chair, sign off the committee assurance certificate, and this will confirm the committee has fulfilled its obligations? Yeah, we can, in agreement with that. I don't know what we do if you're not in agreement with that, but I'm not seeing any dissent here. Okay, if we can do that. Thanks very much, Vanessa. That then moves us on to the committee work plan, which has been circulated. I don't think there's anything I want to add to that. Anything, any questions or queries any members have got in the work plan? No? Okay, if we can note that. And that, I think, closes the public part of the meeting. So that will allow some people to leave the private